From the bottom, we out here getting it. Don't know what a limit is. Only surround yourself with people you plan to finish with. Consistency the key, unlock the door to your dreams. Prepare, plan, and execute, complete, and then repeat.
What up? Back with another episode of From the Bottom podcast. We got your host Fitz. We got Ty.
Yo.
We got Shalisha.
Good evening.
We got Tati.
Hey, how you doing?
We got the Greek goddess Tati.
Hey, what? Don't call me that.
We got the Greek goddess Tati.
Don't call me that. What?
Yeah, make sure you click that like button, subscribe button. All the info is in the description. Make sure you're supporting, share it on your social media, all that great stuff. We're gonna get into it. So how's everyone's entrepreneurship journey going? We haven't really caught up with that in a few weeks. How's everyone doing?
Good. Stressing out. Tired. Everything. But still moving forward.
What a journey.
Bruh, she don't ever give no details. I'm tired.
So I'm still taking my classes for the Texas real estate. The goal and plan is to be done and with the courses and to be done taking that test for the end of this month. We're still just working and saving for the move to Texas. And when I get there, we can start the real estate business and start closing some deals.
Nice. I just want to say, when you give those answers, it's like a teacher. You're like, so what's gonna be on the test? And they're like, all right, I'm gonna tell you. There's gonna be some questions, and they're gonna be questions, and you're gonna have to answer them. It's like, all right, I guess I can study from that. I guess I can. There's my study guide.
Well, maybe we gave a little bit more detail.
Yeah. Now Tati, she about to come in and try to look. All right. How you been, Ty?
I love you, Ty.
How's your entrepreneurship journey going?
Everything's going good, bro. I actually tapped into this app for like dog walking and stuff, and you kind of market yourself. So I've been on that a lot, just trying to get a feel for what it's like when I do my own stuff, and just kind of learning through error and mistakes to see what gets me business and what doesn't. So giving my chance to see where I can improve with putting myself out there, making people want to work with me, as well as just giving as much detail as possible and just being clear and precise on everything. So currently working through that right now, just seeing what happens for a little while, and we'll adjust and adapt from there.
Nice. So you're on this app and you're kind of test driving to see what it would be like when you actually get going.
Yep.
Nice. All right. What about you, Tati?
Well, it's been going pretty good.
Very much.
So since our podcast last week, we've added 11 subscribers to the YouTube channel. So, good growth going on over there. We've also added an additional, 20 or so people to the Instagram page, followers. So definitely got some growth going on. So just got to keep, the same strategies going, and we should continue to see growth in these areas.
Nice. So we got some growth on the social media platforms. That's good, because the more followers, the more subscribers, the more people we can help. So that's positive. And as for me, the journey still kicking. I was able to start the LLC for Fitzmindset. So it's official now. It's a legitimate business. I can coach under the business. I can hire people. I can buy assets with it. I can sign for it. I can get a business bank account, which I'm going to do that next week, get the business insurance and all that stuff. So I'll be able to walk people through that in the future. Just another tool in the arsenal of showing people how to get it done, make that transition. With the Fitzmindset as well, finished up the website. So that's launched. It is active. So you can go on there right now and schedule a coaching session. You can go on there, see all the episodes of the podcast. the blog, all of that. We have a blog going now, so we're good. And as far as future things, still doing the real estate, making moves towards that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But I'm excited about the topic for this week. And the reason why is because I think that it's one of those things where it's easy to see in other people, but not ourselves. And I think that when we're stressed and when we're going through life, we can oftentimes we don't see the mirror that other people play in our lives. Like we see them for who we think they are instead of who they're showing us we are. And that's why this topic is very important. So, if you're listening or you're watching, I suggest you get out maybe a piece of paper, get your phone out, take some notes, because we got some questions lined up that I think through discussion will definitely be able to help some people. So I'm gonna jump right into it. What do you guys think that you're taking for granted right now in life, and how could it be holding you back? And we'll start with Shalisha.
Ooh, I thought about this one a lot. At first, I was like, I don't know if I'm taking anything for granted at this point, but after doing some reflecting, realizing that there are a couple things that I am taking for granted. With the move coming up and everything, and I moved back into Dad's house, I am saving 100%, but not as much as I should. But I don't have to pay anything here. So it's like I guess I would be taking that a little bit for granted. Still working on that little shopping problem that we're getting underway, but it's nothing definitely crazy. I'm still sticking to my budget that I mapped out, but the extra or the little bit extra that's left, I could also just apply it to that instead of wasting it, because I've just realized I've been wasting a lot of just extra stuff. So yeah, just gonna work on that. That way, build up what we need to get built up for everything that's to come.
Okay, so you're living somewhere where you don't really have to pay bills, and you're saying you're taking that for granted because you're spending more money than you would like to.
Yes. Well, like I have a budget mapped out for myself, and I'm still sticking to that budget, but I've also been doing other things to bring in income. I'm also including that income into the budget that I have mapped out and to my savings plan. But I guess you could say because I do have some left over once I do my budget, and it's not just like a couple extra, but instead of wasting that I have, I could be adding that to the savings as extra instead of using it to, I guess you could say, splurge. Because I was going over, when I was doing my budget, I was going over like what I spend my money on. And I've realized that even feeding that little shopping addiction. So
Okay.
bringing that back. And because I don't have to pay anything here, really, I feel like after I did my reflection, it was like, okay, well, we can be using more of having the luxury of not having to pay anything here, minus, like my car and all that stuff like that. But just kind of just been, I feel like I should have redid the budget, and I started on redoing it, but I feel like I should have did it sooner because I don't have to pay.
So you're taking for granted the fact that you don't have to pay anything, and the result is that you're not paying close attention to your budget the way you would be if you did have to pay those bills.
Well, no, because I'm still paying attention to my budget. Like I'm hitting my budget, I'm hitting my savings goals. But what I'm saying is I'm fortunate enough to not have to pay anything here. And because I don't have to pay anything here, and I have been doing multiple things to bring in other sources of income, my total income amount has expanded. So instead of So instead of looking at it like, okay, well, you don't have to pay anything here, the expansion, also, instead of doing the minimal that I was doing, I can put in more, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. All right, so we'll move on to Ty, and you know everyone can jump in too at the same time, because at the end of the day, we want to challenge each other. So if there's something that we see in Shalisha or me or Ty or Tati, you know, we want to challenge each other, because ultimately somebody at home is looking and they're like, well, what about this and what about that? So Ty, what do you think that you're taking for granted in your life, and how could it be affecting you or holding you back?
I think one thing that I was taking for granted that I've gotten better at is time. So just thinking I have all the time in the world to do things, not really being serious about taking my time seriously. So like for my example, you know, when I first started my master's program, I wasn't like dedicating too much time to the asynchronous work, doing it. I was doing it on time, but it was always like last minute. So I wasn't really taking advantage of my time to actually get that stuff done, to work on something else, to work on the next assignment or next project that I want to do, or, you know, anything towards my goals. To the point I am now, I'm doing 20 weeks of work for class that's not even due yet, but I'm doing 20 weeks of work so I can have what that time I would spend on that, and I can have that time to put towards other things, working out, working on my mental, emotional, spiritual, working on the business, you know, those type of things. I have that time to dedicate to that. While I got this going, it's moving the way I needed to move for right now, but I'm doing better with the time, getting up early, having a routine. So trying to hit every hour or every couple hours with something to do. So if I want to sit back and chill for a few hours, I make sure I do something else that's productive. So I'm not just sitting there watching Netflix all day doing nothing. If I'm watching Netflix, I'm doing something else, homework, designs, whatever the case may be. So I'm always making sure I'm multitasking and using my time effectively.
Okay, so you was taking your time for granted a little bit, and you found some ways to kind of fill that time in with meaningful action.
Yep.
Great. That's great. All right, Tati, what about you?
So
Yeah.
what happens?
Nothing. You could.
Oh, so I've pondered this a lot, and I don't know if this is a stretch. Challenge me if you think that I'm missing something here, but I don't think I take things for granted. I can't
It's a
think
hard
of
one for me too.
I can't think of anything that I'm taking for granted. Like I'm a very grateful person, and I appreciate everything from the bugs that walk this earth to the car that I have parked outside to the air that I breathe. And I'm constantly thinking about all those things every day. And I think it's part of the reason why I move really slow, is because I like to just take all of it in. Because one day you will leave this earth, and those things will just be, you'll just join the dust in the never ending space that we exist in. Is just, I just love taking it in and seeing it. As a child, I was ritually told stories of being without various different things and the different situations that people went through in the past. And it was like a daily thing. And so after hearing those stories for so long, it just got ingrained in me, this idea to just take everything in and realize that what I have, a lot of people don't have. And that I think that's where I stand with the gratefulness.
Yeah, and I think I'm not gonna do a challenge, because I can think of some things, but I've been called a bully on the podcast before when I get to challenging. So
Oh, what you
So
thinking? What
we're not
you
gonna be
thinking?
real.
What you thinking?
Not
Go
gonna be
ahead and say
real.
that.
I
Okay.
said I was open to the challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, she
So-
said challenge her.
But so the thing is though, is like, if somebody thinks that they're not doing something or that they are doing something, and you say something, is it really helpful to tell them that? If that, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
I
in
mean,
my opinion-
it's just an observation. So I feel where Tatiana's coming from because that's what I try to practice every day. Being grateful for the littlest things. It don't matter what it is. Um, but she's doing it. The thing about the challenge is that she's doing it her way that she thinks that she's being grateful for it. So to you, it may not seem like she's being grateful for it to you, but to her, she's doing it at her own pace and doing it the way she thinks that she's giving grace to it.
which that's fine. But if I ask a question and I say, for instance, well, what about this situation? If you were truly grateful for this, then would you behave this way?
By
You know,
your
like-
standards, though.
Yeah. So what I'm saying that when I ask the question, it will come off as like, oh, well, that's
If you don't
me.
just ask that question.
Well, you got to make sure that she knows your definition, like we talked about earlier in the group chat this
Okay.
week.
So let me give a definition.
How you feel and what you see. That way she can understand.
To me, being grateful is not about what you think you do, but what you actually do. Like how it's not thinking that you're grateful, but showing that you're grateful. Or you know what I'm saying? So for instance, if I'm grateful that I have food in the fridge, what am I doing to actually show that I'm grateful? Is it something that I just say, or is it like, am I behaving that way when I talk about my food on social media, when I tell people about it, when I'm cooking my food, the thoughts that are going through my head? So if I say that I'm grateful in every area of my life, then that must mean that someone could not come along and say, well, what about this one area where you're kind of struggling in right now? You know what I'm saying? Like that you want to be better in, but you're not as good as you want to be. You know what I'm saying? Like,
So like with the food, I think a good example would be like if I'm grateful for my food, maybe it's not me posting stuff on social media, maybe it's not the cooking, but when it comes to actually eating the food, I always clean my plate because you never know when something may happen or come along. Like I feel like there's multiple ways to show gratefulness for having food. It could be you never waste food. It could be that you are always in the fridge at the top of every hour just looking at the food in your fridge. Like a lot of people do that just unconsciously. You'll go to the fridge, you'll open it up, you'll look at what's in the fridge, and you close the door. You never even got anything out the fridge. You're just looking in there. I've seen a lot of people do that. Maybe it's while you're cooking the food, you're just savoring the smells, which isn't something verbal or something that you're being really obvious about. And someone would have to ask you, when are you grateful for your food? And then it's like, oh, when I'm cooking it, I really enjoy the smells and the taste and everything that comes along with that process. And then with the social media, I mean, that's another thing too. It's like I'm constantly taking pictures of the meals I'm eating because I'm so happy I've been graced with the presence of this delicious food and the beauty of it that I just had to take a picture and show it to other people. Now some people can take that the wrong way as well and be like, well, why are you showing me all your food and stuff? Like, I'm over here, I've got ramen noodles. You showing me all this crab cake stuff. Like, what's going on? I don't know, but
so I'll give a concrete example then.
Yeah, wait, for me, right?
Well, I'll just throw a concrete example out there, right? If let's say like me and Shalisha are siblings, and let's say I say, you know what, I'm grateful for Shalisha, but I never talk to her. I never do any, like I don't do anything to maintain the relationship, but then I come along and I say, I'm grateful for her. How does that look? Like, does that look like I'm just saying I'm grateful for it? Like, how do you actually know that you're grateful for something? Is it something that you just say, or is it something that you do that shows that you're actually grateful for it? Because if somebody that can reach me easily and they don't really talk to me, they don't ask how I'm doing, they don't really show any interest in me, if they say that they're grateful to have a relationship with me, wouldn't they take advantage of that relationship because there's no telling when I could be gone?
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah, but let's say that they didn't necessarily spend as much time as they wanted to with that person, would you necessarily say they took it for granted?
I would say that.
Question, because she said she doesn't feel like she takes anything for granted and that she's grateful for everything.
So then
And
all
you
the
had a question, so that means that I feel like that meant that you felt like there was something that she might take for granted.
So I will say, based on the example you just gave, I don't know if you gave that example for a particular reason now, but I can think of some people in my life where maybe I could call them more. And, you know, maybe the fact that I don't call them as often as I should, maybe a sign that I'm not as grateful for the life that they're living and the fact that they're still alive and well here on this earth and that we can have conversations still. So I guess it's that, yeah, I would say maybe there are some things where I could work on. I'm not 100% perfect when it comes to the gratefulness. There's some things I can work on. Now, definitely, I could think of a few people I could call a little bit more.
and the point is not to call her out or anything or to like do
Right.
anything. It's just that when we're talking about taking things for granted and appreciation, there's always room for growth. You know, it just depends on how much you want to challenge yourself. And this is where so many people struggle at. And if you're listening, this is what I'm saying. You should probably write some things down. Like just the first thing that comes to your mind, don't even think about it. Just like, what could I be doing better? You know, like, what am I not seeing that I could be seeing? Like just asking those questions. Even if you ask a question every single day, if you don't have an answer now, just ask yourself it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Like, did I actually take this day for granted? Was there something in this day that I didn't appreciate fully? You know, like I was driving, maybe someone was driving down the highway and they were stuck in traffic. There's a way that they may have taken that for granted. You know, they didn't appreciate that. Like, wow, I'm actually in a car. You know, like 100 years ago, people spent 3 hours climbing mountains to get to the other side of a canyon so they can go get some water. And here I am talking about 20 minutes in traffic, you know, like those little things that add up, you know, and ultimately can determine whether someone has a good day or not, or a good life.
Another perspective is maybe that traffic kind of could have kept you from getting caught up in an accident because you got to a certain destination at a different time.
Yeah.
You know, just all that stuff plays together.
What were you gonna say, Ty?
I'm gonna challenge you on that challenge though, because I think it's about the quality and not the quantity. So for me, I have people who I haven't talked to, man, probably in years, that we don't really speak on the regular, but when we do talk, it's on the up and up. They know I have respect for them and vice versa. But one of my partners that, you know, I send quotes to, Bible verses, we don't really engage in full dialogue sometimes. It's mainly just me sending him stuff, or he'll send me some stuff. We'll like it, and that's just kind of the routine. But he did post on social media how grateful he was for me sending those things and being consistent with it, because at the times he did need it, I was there. So I think it's more of the quality and how you talk to that person, because I could talk to you every day and we could not talk about anything. We could just it'd just be awkward and weird. You know what I mean? But it's the quality, because like so for example, my grandma, one of the biggest persons in my life, she passed away, but I spent a good solid 6 months with her, like every single day. Sometimes we didn't really hang out, we didn't do nothing, just kind of chill, but other days we did. We went everywhere. But it was for me, it was about the quality, what we did, the moments. Like we went and rode bikes. She hadn't rode bikes in like probably 30 years, something like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's that type of love, appreciation, gratefulness. But you could not talk to nobody forever, and you know, there's people I can hit up and we can have a full conversation, or they can hit me up and we can have a decent conversation. And it's not that I'm not grateful for them, but that's just how the dynamic of the situation is, I guess you could say, or the relationship, friendship, whatever that might be. Because people do have their own stuff going on, and it's not that people aren't putting the effort in. That's just the dynamic now. And whoever Tatiana's situation with, they might appreciate her just call in that one time a month, or however the case may go, just because she's calling. It's better if she's calling once and not at all, rather than a million times. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's about the quality and not the quantity.
So I wanna
Here you go.
Okay,
Here you go.
Well, let me
I don't
respond.
think- I
He
think
was
we
talking
got-
about me. I want to
Oh.
respond. Let me get a chance. I just want a chance to respond.
Go ahead.
I'm not saying that every relationship is the same, or that if you don't talk to someone every day that you're taking them for granted. What I'm saying, like, if you have a specific relationship set up and that's just what you guys do, cool, and everything's on the up and up. But if a relationship is in turmoil or it's not in a good place, and you're taking for granted that their time is limited and so is yours, and that you'll get around to it someday, that's what I'm talking about. Like, taking for granted that they're here right now. Like, there's things that people are doing and not, or there's things that people are not doing in their life right now because they think they have so much time. But then in a year from now, when they look back, they're like, wow, I really took that time for granted because I wasn't doing what I should have been doing. So that's what I'm saying, is like, there are some people listening right now that they know what they need to do to strengthen a relationship, because the relationship is not where they want to be, but they're taking the time they have for granted. And ultimately, that's what I'm talking about. Because if that person would, like your friend right now, if something happened to them and you couldn't talk to them again forever, it wouldn't be on like bad terms, like, oh, I wish I would have done this. But in other situations, it could be, like, even if you talk to somebody every single day, let's say you talk to them every single day, but you don't truly tell them how you feel. You don't really tell them, like, there's something on your mind that you've been wanting to tell them, like, hey, I don't like how you talk to me, or hey, I don't like that you do this or that, but you didn't tell them that. Or maybe you did something shady to them. Maybe you cheated with their girl or something and you haven't told them, but you've been waiting to do it. And then it's like, man, I took that time for granted because I didn't do it. That's what I'm talking about, like something in turmoil. But we do have some other questions. I think that was a great dialogue, but we do have to move on because we're trying to keep it under a certain amount of time. But the next question that I want to move into is, so what are you most susceptible to taking things for granted? Like, it's the way that the question was
You
worded.
mean like when?
Yes, it says what, but we'll go with when. When are you most susceptible to taking things for granted? And I guess I don't know where the person was going with this question, but it says, or when are you most susceptible to take things for granted? And the way that I took this question was, vulnerability, or, like when, I guess when you're not thinking about it, when you're not making an effort to take things or to be accept things in your life. That's when I think that you're most vulnerable or most susceptible.
Are you talking about the question that I?
Oh, there goes your camera.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I would
yes,
probably say,
When are you
I probably-
most susceptible to take things for granted?
That's what I said. It just says when are most susceptible.
Yeah.
I would say probably when you get, like, when I think of that question, I think of people who praise God and they say, oh, blessings on top of blessings when good things happen. But then when bad stuff happens, they forget about all the good stuff that happened. So I think when you're, I don't want to say really on top, but when things are going the way you want them to go, you're okay. But when they don't go the way you want them to go, then you just forget about all that stuff, that because you didn't get that one thing. Everything leading up to that you were grateful for, but then you didn't get that one thing, and now it's like, all this is bad, all this stuff don't matter no more.
Right.
It's not a blessing anymore, it's a curse.
Right.
So yeah, I'd probably say around there.
So when you're at the top and your guard is down, kind of. Okay. So what about you, Shalisha? When do you think you're most susceptible to taking things for granted?
I would agree, but I would also say maybe sometimes, like, if you're not, let's say things aren't going that good and you're in a funk and you're not realizing that even though you're in that funk, things could get better, and there are things that you could be doing in that moment to make things better. So you're taking that time for granted because you're salty.
And there's a reason for that. And I'll get around to that when it's my turn. But what about you, Tati?
Oh, I was gonna repeat what, basically echoing what Tyree and Shalisha have already said.
Okay. So I don't know what to say. I don't
And
know
then
what to
also,
say.
I mean, like, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I feel like there are a lot of different times that people are more susceptible to taking things for granted. I feel like it can be when you're at the top, when you're in the middle, when you're at the bottom. Because, sometimes, we all just get caught up in life and our own things that we do take more things for granted than we realize.
But there is a common trait, I think, between whether you take something for granted at the top, the middle, or the bottom. And I think that that common trait is being closed-minded. And the reason I think that that's the common trait is because when you're at the top, let's say the top could be you've achieved your goal. Now it's like it can be hard to accept new information because it's like, shut up, I don't need to listen to you. What can you tell me? I'm at the top. When you're in the middle, it's like, shut up, I don't want to hear you. You're just trying to drag me down. I'm almost there. I'm not gonna. And then when you're at the bottom, it's the insecurity, like, I don't want you telling me anything because you think you're better than me. So I think on every stage, there's this closed-mindedness that can happen to where you close off some ideas that can make you go, maybe I am taking something for granted. Or, like you get, for instance, there's a lot of people that they make a lot of money, but they neglect their family in certain areas. You know what I'm saying? But if you tell them that, they'll say, I'm making all this money, I'm doing my job, but you can't point out to them that maybe they're taking their family for granted because they're excelling in this other area of their life. I think that relates to being closed-minded when it comes to, just accepting information.
I agree.
Yeah. I also think people forget their why. So once they get to where they're at, they forget why they're doing it. Why did you do real estate? Why did you do psychology? Why did you go to school? People get so caught up in their own desires that they forget why they started this in the first place. And then they get to a place where they're like, well, why is all this happening to me? Because you forgot. You weren't disciplined enough. You forgot. You got sucked into stuff that you weren't supposed to get sucked into. You neglected what your foundation.
I'll take it a step further and say that most people don't know why they even started, and they don't know, and not that they don't have an idea, but I don't think they have a strong core, like, this is why. I think a lot of it has to do with what other people told them to do, or, like what they think they should be doing, but they're not really sure. So they're just dabbling and trying something out. And then when they get to the point to where it's like, okay, I've gone too far to come back, now they have to make something up so that it justifies why they've been doing what they're doing. It's almost like when you're little and you don't actually know why you're doing something, but then an adult says, why are you doing that? And then I don't, like, as adults, we don't like to say, I don't know, I don't have it all figured out, I'm lost. We don't like to say that. So some people will come up with the why on the spot and then try to live with that because they don't want to admit that they don't actually have a deep-seated reason for why they're doing what they're doing. Because it really takes effort to understand why you're doing what you're doing and to attack something with the why. Like, it's different when you go into something with the why compared to when you figure that why out in the middle of something, and that's why they say write your goals down and stuff like that, because that won't change. That is what you wrote down. With the why that you didn't really write down and you don't really understand, you could always change a little piece of it to fit what you're doing. You can always change the rules. It's like if nobody has the rules to the game, anyone could just say, oh, now a 3-pointer is worth 2 points. But that's just, I guess that's how I see it. Does anyone else have anything to say on that before we go to the next question? Tati, Ty.
No, I just think that's a good point to make, especially about the strong why. I have a strong why. That's what drives me. I have to have a reason or some sort of strong motivation to do anything that I do. So
Mm.
I agree.
That why is super important, man.
It is.
What happens? Okay, so I got one more challenge before we move on. But when you're okay, let's say, because I don't want to say you run out of gas on your why, but when you complete your mission of why you started, what's next? Does your foundation crumble or you move on to the next why? Like, how strong is your foundation? Because what if you hit a bump in the road that makes you question all of it?
That can be a good thing. You know, I don't think bumps in the road are bad. I think a bump
They're
in the
not.
road, I think a bump in the road can tell you that you have an oil leak, right? I think a bump in the road can tell you there's something wrong with this car that maybe I was missing because it's been on flat surface and everything's been good, but this bump in the road is an indicator to me that I need to change. I think that people are scared of the bump in the road because they know that that bump in the road will lead them down a path where they're going to have to take action and change. So I think when you figure out that you are taking something for granted, now you have to change. You know what I'm saying? Like when people will purposefully, I feel like, avoid things that they know if they look, they're going to have to do something about. Like when we say ignorance is bliss, I think people truly, they don't want to go down a path because they know what they'll probably find. And then they know that now there's no excuse for not dealing with this. So I don't think that someone's foundation is necessarily shaken because they've reached their goal. I think that once you reach your goal, you just make another goal, or you just say, okay, I'm fulfilled with what I have. Let me figure out where things go. But people that that set goals and achieve those goals, those are usually people that they're doing stuff for the thing itself. You know, like they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the challenge or something like that. Like that's just their personality. Like they're always looking for ways and things to do so that they can accomplish something, not necessarily to be the best, but just to constantly grow. What do you got? Oh,
Oh, okay.
no, I didn't know if you were going to say something. You just, the lead in was just like,
What?
I don't know.
I think a good example is the fossil fuel industry, because they've built their foundation up on thinking, you know, they were the heroes of society. We're the ones going in, we're extracting all these, you know, petroleums and oils from the ground, and we're processing them into things that people can use to heat their homes and run their cars. And, you know, all these years later, which I think the information was available a lot sooner than they like to lead people to believe, but, you know, at some point they came across the information that revealed that what they were doing was doing more harm to the environment than good, that what they were doing wasn't sustainable, and that eventually we'd have to look to other things to provide ourselves with warmth and, you know, power. And so I think right there you have a good example of, here's somebody who built their whole foundation up and their whole structure on something that wasn't sustainable, and the bump in the road is, you know, all the climate change scientists and the environmental activists coming out and saying, what you're doing here is you're setting us up for failure, because if we continue using things in this way, after so long, we're not going to be able to exist on this planet as a species, and we're just going to, you know, either we're going to have to move on or we're going to perish. And even if we move on, if we just keep doing the same things, we're just going to keep having the same problem over and over again. We can't sustain ourselves on these types of fuel sources. And so I think that's a good example of a group that built themselves up on a certain foundation, and now here's this bump in the road where it's like, okay, now what do we do? And now they're being challenged by different, you know, cleaner sources of energy. And, you know, although those, you know, those have to be scrutinized too, because a lot of these batteries and all these, solar cells and wind turbines, require certain things that have to be mined out of the ground, and that's, damaging as well. So that's another thing, but definitely an example of what you were talking about, Tyree, like what happens when you hit that bump in the road. And then it's like, how strong is your foundation? I think, we see this throughout human history. It's just some things just come to an end at some point. Things just crumble and fall apart. And sometimes you get lucky with your foundation, with what you chose to ground yourself on, whether it was luck or it was cleverness or whatever you did right, and you end up with something that lasts a really long time. And sometimes you're not so lucky, or whatever thinking you had when you chose that particular foundation and chose to build up from that, and it doesn't last as long and it doesn't stand the test of time. And that's just a matter of having that foresight, and that is ingenuity the right word? What does that mean?
I think they're different. I think you need to have a strong foundation and a strong why. I feel like the why is having a strong why is like gasoline to fuel the car, to help you going. So that way, you can build towards what you want to build towards. But I feel like having a strong foundation is also necessary. So I have both. Like I have my foundation. I know exactly what I want. I know where I want to go. I know what I want to come from things that I want. But it's like my why is something that is helping me get there. Because it's like, this is what you want, but why do you want what you want? So for me, it's just more fuel. But I try to, and with my coaching with Robert, we talked about foundation and strengthening it and making sure that, you have to have your foundation strong at all times. I agree with Robert. A bump in the road isn't necessarily a crack in your foundation. So for me personally, I have both. I have a strong foundation, and my why is my gasoline to help keep me going. I feel like they are both key.
Well,
Oh, you were first.
No, I was gonna say we do have a few more questions, and I just want to make sure that we get, because I haven't asked a question from everyone, but I was gonna say that's a perfect segue into the next question, which is how does being taken for granted, because we've been talking about taking things for granted, how does being taken for granted, whether it be in a relationship, at work, whatever, just in life, maybe in the past, how does that affect your own personal growth, like your foundation?
It doesn't.
If it does.
I
Okay.
wouldn't say that it affects the foundation. I would say it can hinder your personal growth, but not necessarily affect your foundation.
Mhm. So
Ask the question again.
how does being taken for granted hinder your personal growth?
How would it?
That's what we're asking.
Do you think that it does?
Well, what I'm trying, how does being taken for granted, like someone taking you for granted, hinder your personal growth?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't that?
What if you're somebody that constantly allows yourself to be taken for granted?
So
what
like
within yourself would you? What within yourself would you have to change or fix to where that's not a problem? And then if you are constantly allowing that, why?
Oh, okay. I mean, if you're being used, but you're still doing the work and getting whatever you get out of it, I don't know how that might get in the way of your own personal growth. It may affect the relationships you have with the people who are using you, but as far as you personally, I don't know.
If you are continuously letting somebody, or if you're continuously taking something for granted, or if you're letting someone take you for granted, you don't think that affects like your personal growth at all, as far as let's just say, I would say being able to, like how we talked about it, because I feel like we touched on this topic a little bit in a previous podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about, listening to yourself and trusting in yourself enough to know that it's okay to set those boundaries to where you're not being taken for granted.
Oh, okay. So with the being used, is it like a confidence issue? Like you're being used and you don't want to be used, but you don't have the confidence to stand up to this person that's using you and taking it
That
for granted?
it depends on the person and the situation, but typically, yeah, like why aren't you trusting in yourself to set those boundaries to where you're not going to be taken for granted? Or is it that you're allowing yourself to be taken for granted because you feel like that is your worth or that's what you deserve? If it's less than what you deserve, then I feel like you need to do some reevaluating.
So I would say to that, I think that it sounds like the issue already existed. And so the fact that you're being used and or taken for granted, that whatever confidence issue in that particular example that's going on, I think that it sounds like that was a pre-existing issue. And so the actual being taken for granted in the moment isn't having an effect on your personal development because you already needed to personally develop prior to being taken for granted. And they just took advantage of it. Was basically like an opportunity was there because you had these confidence issues, but them doing it didn't actually create the issue. The issue was already there and they just took advantage of the opportunity.
I get what Tatiana's saying. And
I get what you're saying, but yes, I get what you're saying. The issue could have already been there and they're just taking that for granted. But what about how we talked about last time about people who don't, or they don't realize they're being taken for granted, or they're not realizing they're being taken for granted? Because we're talking about is the person that's being taken for granted to blame just as
Yes.
much as the person taking them for granted. That's what we were talking about in the last one.
Okay.
I think that
So, relation to the question, if you're to blame for yourself being taken for granted, how is that affecting your personal development and your personal growth?
I think when we're talking about being taken for granted, we have to separate it from being taken advantage of.
Oh, okay.
Because being taken advantage of is where you're losing out on something because someone else is doing something for their benefit at the expense of you. But I think being taken for granted could mean that, for instance, Chick-fil-A has a sale today and they're selling their chicken sandwich for $1, and you took that for granted, and now a week later you got to pay full price. Like, you took it for granted when it was cheaper, and now that you got to pay more, you see like, okay, I should have gotten in back then. But I think when we're talking about personal growth, it's if you're being taken for granted, I think that that's just a sign to you that you're actually more valuable than what you're allowing yourself to be recognized as for in terms of other people. So that's a sign that, you know, that's a good sign to me. If you recognize that you're being taken advantage or that not that you're being taken advantage of, but you're being taken for granted,
Right.
then that's a sign to you that you need to step your game up and get on a level to where you feel like you're around people that aren't taking you for granted, that really appreciate your value. You know, like we could say that we're being taken for granted because, you know, who knows, in a year or so, people are going to be paying money to hear what we have to say. But people are getting it for free now. They're taking that for granted. But then when we start asking people to pay for tickets and stuff to this and that and pay for this, they're going to be like, oh, come on, you going to charge me? Well, you took it for granted when we was doing it for free. Now there's people that want to pay us. So you got to pay us.
So with what you're saying, just to clarify, being taken advantage of means that the person being taken advantage of is losing out on something because the other person is taking advantage of them, versus being taken for granted. The person being taken for granted may not necessarily be losing anything, but it's just recognized that this person doesn't see my full worth.
Correct.
Or, you know, isn't using me to the fullest because whatever reason they have.
Yeah, it's like if I got a car and let's say you didn't, and I gave you a ride everywhere, but I don't feel like you're taking advantage of me because I'm offering. And then all of a sudden my car breaks down and then you don't have a ride no more. You might say, oh, well, wow, I really took that for granted because he was giving it to me for free, but now there's nobody else in my life that would give me these rides for free. Maybe I wasn't really appreciating that to the level that I should have, because when he was giving me rides, I was always complaining about the radio station, and I was complaining about the way he drives, and I was complaining about this and complaining about that. Okay. But now that it's not there anymore, wow, I took that for granted because now I see that other people aren't going to do what he did. You know what I'm saying?
So complaints were filed in how do you know they were taking it for granted? Okay, they were complaining about the radio station and the way
just by the way they behave.
So wait a minute. So let me get, just because, so say you listening to because I know sometimes when I be driving, I be throwing on, the suavecito, y'all would listen to the Spanish radio sometimes. I just throw it up, and then but you be in the passenger seat talking about, bro, don't nobody want to listen to that, da 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 da. So are you taking the ride for granted when I throw on the Spanish music and you don't want to listen to the Spanish music?
I'm not taking the ride.
Or when I drive, you be complaining about how I drive too slow. So when I drive slow and you be telling me, bro, why you drive so slow? You take so long to get to da 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 dee do do da da dee. So it's when you say all that, when just them two things right there, you've done with me. So are you taking my rides for granted?
I don't think I'm taking them for granted.
He's taking you driving for granted.
Okay.
I don't think I'm taking it for granted. I think that you just
said them was prime examples. So
no,
go based off the example.
Boy, you're not driving me somewhere. You're driving us. You're not if you go out of your way.
Wait a minute.
If you go, wait a minute. There's a difference between me saying, hey, you don't have a ride, let me give you a ride somewhere, and me and you just going to the same place and you playing this music and I don't really prefer this music. I don't think that I'm taking that ride for granted. I think that
you're not going to the same place.
Or maybe I wasn't really, I just was like, let me drive you, man.
In that case, then I wouldn't say that. Then it wouldn't be a thing. Oh. If I don't have a car and somebody's giving me a ride, I have nothing to say about what they're listening to.
Oh.
Or what they do in the car.
Yeah. If somebody's letting me live with them and they do certain things in their house, I'm not gonna tell them about it. But if we're splitting, the bills, or this is both of our place, then
that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
You have a little bit more leverage with what you got. Hey man, you can't be doing that over there.
What you got to say, Ty? You out of this one?
Y'all got it, brother. I don't, for me, everything in life is temporary. Everything, from the success, from the bad, ugly, everything that we do is temporary. So for me, what somebody says, what somebody does doesn't really affect me unless I let it affect me. It doesn't affect my personal growth either. Whether they take me for granted or not, that's on them. It's not really a loss for me. It's not really going to be like, oh, so-and-so took me for granted and now that they're not in this position in my life. It's more of they played their role and that's just what it was. Now it's time for me to go this route. And they just can't come. They have to stay at the stop they are at or go the left lane. You know what I mean? So I think those people who are getting taken for granted, they know. I don't think it's nothing that's they're not oblivious to it. I just think they don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to set those boundaries based on whatever reason they have. But at some point, it's not the other person affecting your growth, it's you affecting your growth because you're not setting boundaries. You're not telling them, hey, this is what you're doing. This is a problem. We need to fix this. And vice versa. They might be doing that to somebody else that could possibly, skyrocket them to the moon, whether that be personal development or business or whatever. So I think it goes hand in hand, but you can't let people, if you were to die tomorrow, none of this stuff would matter. Nobody would care about any of this stuff, bro. And that's the mentality that I have. Like, if all this, the computer, the house, everything, if all this were to be gone tomorrow, how would I feel? And that's what I try to put into my life every day, because I want to live my life. I don't want to live it to society standards. I don't want to live it by, you know, all these things, social media and stuff like that. I feel like that plays such a huge part. But it's like, when you take a deep look at everything, it's like none of this stuff really matters. I'm grateful for it. I'm not gonna take it for granted, but like, why am I so pressed about what somebody has to say? Or if they're taking me for granted, it's not my. If I set my boundary, I set my boundary.
Figure out what the issue is
Got
and
a
then
dark
work at your
skinned
own pace
friend
and
look
get it
like
going.
Freddie Jackson.
I'll just leave it at that. But let me get on to this next
I did 3
question.
weeks.
Let me get on to this next
I did 3
question.
weeks.
So, what impact would more appreciation and gratitude have on your life?
Everything will come your way. You'll start to see that you have become more simpler rather than making everything complex. I feel like when you're simple, you appreciate everything, you're grateful. It seems that things go in a flow and they start going the way you want them. Even if you hit a bump and it's like, okay, well, you didn't necessarily get this, something else is waiting for you because you appreciated up to that moment and you didn't get what you wanted, but then there's something else that's kind of the same thing but better. So I feel like you get into a flow, you start to really get moving, and you're genuinely happy and joyful about everything.
What do you think, Tatiana?
When you are more appreciative,
Preach, preacher.
when you
Mm.
are more grateful,
Yeah.
you will see that the glass appears half
done.
empty. I mean, half
Amen.
full instead of half empty. All
He
the
said, "Amen." She messed up.
Amen.
How that sound? How you gonna say amen when somebody messed up?
Can I get a whiteout? Can I get a blackout, whiteout, whatever you want to call it? Can we just, whatever? Look, man, the point is, when you come to be more appreciative and more grateful, you will see the good in things before you see the bad, or you might not even see the bad at all. You'll just be happier, more fulfilled, more positive. You won't be dragging your feet with things. I think that's a beautiful thing. You know, you wake up every day and it's not ruin the day. Not ruin, but rue. Like I rue the day.
Mm-hmm. I'm hip.
What do you think, Shalisha?
Julie, okay. I agree with everything that has been said up to this point.
Of course.
Ruin the day. Lord, I love you, Tati. No, but I also feel like it'll help elevate you, you know, when if you don't take for granted certain things, or if you're just more mindful, appreciative of everything.
You got to get the backup camera.
Of life and the opportunities that you have, you're just going to reach higher levels in life, and you're going to again feel more fulfilled. So
No, I agree with that. And
Yes.
I think as far as what more appreciation in my life, what impact that would have, I think that it would make me more focused. I think that I'd be able to achieve my goals faster, and I think I'd be able to set better goals, and I think that I would ultimately be able to add more value to other people's lives. And I think that, you know, you can never go wrong with more appreciation. So the more the better. Let me see.
yes,
So I think
be
we're
grateful. Just
Yeah,
be
we're
grateful.
way over time.
Be grateful of everything. Yeah, yo, we passed the time.
if you haven't liked the video, make sure you like the video, comment, subscribe. We gave you guys a little extra today, so we'll skip on.
What is our practical piece of advice?
Okay, we'll give the one practical piece of advice. What's the one practical piece of advice that you would give our listeners today?
Communicate.
Not funny.
Y'all do need to communicate. No, I'm just kidding. Ah,
Not
I
kidding.
would just say I'm not. I'm
She
kidding,
ain't, bro.
but I'm not kidding. We all got from that little segment that we need to communicate better. Okay, no, but and be more grateful, be more mindful, be more present in life. Don't take things for granted, and remember that you do only get one life. So whatever you do with it, just make sure it's what you want to do.
Ty?
I'll leave us with a great quote from Bob Marley.
Nah,
Don't-
There we go.
Shoot.
See, look, we almost made it through the whole video, and you just mess it up, bro. We gonna start taking it out your cut, bro. Every time you cuss, we gonna start taking it out
Nobody
your
messed
cut.
me up.
Anyways, from the great Bob Marley, don't gain the world and lose your soul. Wisdom is better than silver or gold. Rastafari.
Hey, yama, yama.
All right.
What's your practical?
advice?
Oh, my practical piece of advice is, all right,
Go, girl.
practical. All right. Every mosquito bite,
Mm.
every bee, every wasp sting, every time it rains on your parade or the sun beats down on your neck. On the beautiful days, on the ugly days, everything in between, appreciate it, because someday you won't be able to experience any of it. From the womb to the tomb, we're going to be sweeping up your ashes with a broom after we incinerate you. So be grateful.
Fire.
And give thanks.
And give
Fire.
thanks. Thanks ain't only for Thanksgiving people. Although I do love some turkey.
Robert, what is your practical piece of advice that you would love to give our wonderful audience for staying tuned tonight? Lord, we appreciate y'all.
The one practical piece of advice I would say is that you should go after what you want. And I would say, speaking from experience, it wasn't until I put boundaries around what I wanted that I was able to start actually making progress towards them. I used to be someone that had such an open mind that I was never able to work on something and work towards something because I didn't take it seriously. And I wasn't able to take meaningful action towards anything. If you don't want anything, then it makes sense. But if you want something, if you want a certain lifestyle, if you want your kids to have certain things or to not experience what you went through and all these other things,
Preach.
then you have to make a plan. You have to make a plan for that to happen, because there's plenty of examples that I'm sure everyone in their personal life can look to, as far as, whether it's people in their family, people they know, where you can look at them and say that person didn't have a plan, or they did and they gave up on it, or they weren't focused enough. They missed out on this opportunity because they didn't really understand the opportunity in front of them. And so if you have an opportunity in front of you, figure out how you can use that opportunity to live the life that you ultimately want to live. And that's what I'll leave people with. That's
From the bottom.
Getting out the mud, show some love, yeah.